Have you ever put on some soft music after a stressful day when you need to calm down? Or put on some really upbeat song to amp yourself up before a difficult task? Perhaps use music as a tool at the gym? It's no secret to anyone that music has a strong impact on us as humans. It has the power to affect our moods, to make us feel deep and varied emotions, and to bring us together socially. It really is a magical thing that sound waves and frequencies can have such an impact on our reality and our experiences of it. And we're not unique in thinking this. In fact, people all across history and in various different cultures have used music as, for example, to amplify religious, spiritual experiences, like with the mystics, to accompany poetry and theater, etc., and even to use it as a way to heal both mental and physical ailments or illnesses of different sorts. Modern research shows that listening to and playing music has very positive effects on the brain. It can help strengthen our memory, to reduce stress, and even to sometimes help heal us from legitimate illnesses. And it is used today as medical and therapeutic treatment in various different ways. But this is nothing new. We can go way back in history, all the way to the ancient world, to find examples and precursors to the same ideas and practices. Accounts tell us of how the ancient Egyptians would employ music to treat both physical and mental problems. The physicians of ancient Egypt, who were the same people as the priests of ancient Egypt, are said to have called music a medicine for the soul. Even in the Bible, we find evidence of music being used in such a way, where David cures Saul by playing music for him. Quote, "Whenever the evil spirit of God came upon Saul, David would take the lyre and play it. Saul would find relief and feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him." And in ancient Greece, the situation was similar. Mythologically, the god Asclepius was said to cure illnesses by playing music, and the mythical figure Orpheus, primarily famous as a musician, was also associated with healing powers. To the philosophers, music was something very important and powerful. The Pythagoreans conceived of the concept of the music of the spheres as an important aspect of the cosmos, which we have covered in a previous episode on my other channel. And later philosophers like Plato and Aristotle both recognized the power of music to affect emotions and to have a great impact on the moral character of human beings. Plato also called music a medicine for the soul and conceived of it as an important part of education and of perfecting the moral character of people, which in turn could have a major impact on society and its order as a whole. But for this reason, he, as well as others, were careful to also point out that this depended on the kind of music. Certain music, often in particular modes in the music system, made people brave and morally upright, whereas other kinds of music or modes had a negative influence on people. So it was very important that the right kind of music was employed, and that the problematic kinds of music were avoided as much as possible. As an example, the Dorian mode, which Plato seems to have been particularly fond of, was seen as manly and composed, and Plato seems to have conceived in his Timaeus of the heavens being created according to this mode. The Phrygian mode, however, was sensual and even violent. Plato and Aristotle seem to disagree on the Lydian mode, however, Aristotle seeing it as decorous and educative, whereas Plato saw it as voluptuous and sensual. Sadly, we don't find that many detailed statements on the medical or therapeutic role of music from these thinkers, but Aristotle says very clearly that, quote, "It is plain that music has the power of producing a certain effect on the moral character of the soul. And if it has this power, it is clear that the young must be directed to music and must be educated in it. And anyone seems to have an inborn affinity with harmonious sounds and rhythms. Therefore, many wise men assert that the soul is harmony, whereas others say that it has harmony." And that part about harmony is important, because indeed, the Greeks were very much interested in harmony in different ways. We see this with the so-called music of the spheres, where the whole cosmos is seen as a big harmonious composition, and audible music being a kind of corresponding reflection of that wider harmony. In the same way, the soul and body of the person needed to be in harmony too, and according to Plato, music could be used precisely to create harmony and thus good health in a soul that had become disharmonious or disordered. Similarly, Aristotle also saw music as a powerful tool to combat emotional distress by serving as a kind of catharsis where emotions could be expressed, so that people who suffered from uncontrollable emotions, quote, after listening to melodies which raised the soul to ecstasy, relapsed to their normal conditions as if they had experienced a medical or purgative treatment. And much of the same can be said about China, where music played an important role in everything from stateship and official ritual to individual spiritual practice and healing medicine. Music was here, as always, strongly connected to the emotions. Indeed, the word for music in ancient Chinese, yue, is essentially the same as the word for joy or happiness. To the Chinese, music was a very important tool to cultivate moral virtue, de, and as an expression of emotions generally. The famous philosopher Confucius considered music as a very important function for society and for personal development, placing it as a central aspect of his education system. He and his students would often engage in playing and listening to music, and he saw it as a key tool for self-cultivation and the process of becoming morally good and gentlemanly by helping the person express his emotions in a harmonious and cultivated way. So we can see here clear similarities in the thought of Confucius and some of these Chinese thinkers with the philosophers in ancient Greece. And the question of harmony is a core point when it comes to this subject. Of course, the perspective on medical uses of music changes in its particular expression depending on the culture we are talking about and their view of the world and the human being, both physically and psychologically. In ancient China, there was a huge focus precisely on harmony and balance in the world. The religious/philosophical school of Taoism, for instance, posits that there is an unknowable force behind all of reality, the Tao, which shapes it in harmonious ways. The cosmos is a harmonious interrelationships of different elements, just as music is a harmonious relationship of different notes and sounds. The principle of yin and yang is just one expression of this harmony in the cosmos. Quote, great music conforms with the harmony of heaven and earth. And in a spiritual sense, music was seen as an important tool to attune oneself to the cosmic harmony of reality. There is a correspondence between the cosmos as a whole, as a macrocosm, and music and the human being on the other, the microcosm. It is all ruled by the same forces and harmonies. In a text called the Zhuozhang, it says, quote, there are the 6 qi of heaven, which descend to produce the 5 flavors, expand to make the 5 colors, manifest themselves in the 5 tones, and in excess produce the 6 illnesses. The cosmos is ruled by the forces of qi, which is, ideally, balanced in a harmonious way. And as we can see, there is correspondence between different elements in the world. The 5 physical elements, fire, earth, water, wood, and metal, which correspond to the 5 seasons, winter, spring, summer, late summer, and fall. And these, in turn, correspond to the 5 tones, or the notes of the pentatonic scale that is central to Chinese music. So, with the help of music and its harmony, mirroring the harmony of the cosmos, the microcosmic human being can also attune himself to the harmony of the cosmos, thus creating an inner harmony leading to both spiritual benefit in a religious sense, but also in more concrete, health-related ways by creating mental stability and inner balance. In the Yue Yi, it says, quote, music is lovely and harmonious, it directs spirits and follows along with heaven. Ritual is discriminating and fitting, it secures ghosts and follows along with earth. Therefore the sage creates music to respond appropriately to heaven, creates ritual to be congruent with earth. When ritual and music are clarified and perfected, heaven and earth can fulfill their functions. And the famous Zhuangzi continues on this metaphor of harmony when he says, quote, to harmonize with men is called making human music, to harmonize with heaven is called making heavenly music. In this way, music became an important part of Chinese medicine and health practice more generally. In fact, it could also be used more literally as medicine or almost as a tonic or elixir, being used medically to cure particular illnesses. Perhaps one had listened too much to the dravel coming from Zheng and became sick somehow. In all these authors, they always say, just like in Greece, there's a distinction between good music and bad music, and the music coming from the state of Cheng is sort of universally agreed to be the worst kind of music for some reason. I don't know what those poor people did, but that's a very recurring theme in these old ancient texts. Music could be employed thus not just in a more general sense of creating bodily and spiritual harmony, but very functionally to cure specific ailments such as depression or indeed physiognomical conditions by, once again, creating balance in the different bodily functions and forces. Certain kinds of music are appropriate for different purposes. In war, big drums and loud instruments would be used as it helped to heighten the morale and fighting spirit of the troops, but a very different kind of music would be used to cure someone with melancholy, for instance. And similar ideas continued further down in history as well. For example, in the Islamic world, we see a flourishing of music theory and practice, including music's use in therapeutic and medical ways. Much of this was of course influenced by the earlier Greek writers that we have explored, whom the Muslim and Islamic thinkers took so much inspiration from, but they also innovated in significant ways. In the early Islamic world, such as during the Abbasid Caliphate, music was often considered an important part of higher education, and some of the great philosophers of the day wrote about music and its wide therapeutic effects in their works. One of the earliest and most significant of these is the very formative philosopher Al-Kindi, who wrote extensively about music in his works and appears to have been a musician himself. We find similarities here with the Chinese case, where there is a large system of correspondences between different elements of the universe. Al-Kindi and most of the other philosophers adapted an Aristotelian cosmology, where the world is essentially built on the four elements: air, fire, earth, water, which correspond to dryness, wetness, cold, and heat, which in turn corresponds to the four humors in the human body, as conceived in Galenic medicine, which is blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm. And music also connects to these correspondences. Indeed, the oud, or lute, which was considered the king of instrument and the instrument of philosophers according to Al-Kindi, at this time the oud had 4 strings. And this was very important. The 4 strings of the oud, as you have probably already guessed, correspond to the 4 elements, etc. This was really only a philosophical or metaphysical explanation for why music was so effective on the mind and body, because philosophers like Al-Kindi used music in a therapeutic and medical way. By playing music for patients, they could seemingly cure all kinds of different illnesses. Now, most of them were mental conditions such as depression and stress, but we also have accounts by Al-Kindi that he supposedly cured a paralyzed child by playing certain kinds of music for him. Whether you want to believe that story or not is up to you, but it's in the sources. Similarly, in the writings of the mysterious Ikhwan as-Safa, the Brethren of Purity, a secretive anonymous group of philosophers in the 10th century, music plays an important role too. In their major work of epistles, they dedicated a full epistle to music in particular, where they discuss its therapeutic use, as well as connections to cosmology, astrology, and the elements. Quote, "You should know, dear brother, may God aid you and us with the spirit of His, that in every manual craft the matter, hayula, dealt with, consists of naturally occurring material, and that all its products are physical forms. The exception is music, for the matter it deals with consists entirely of spiritual substances, namely, the souls of those who listen to it. The harmony of music corresponds to the harmony and beauty of the cosmos at large, the noble creation of God, and through music we can experience and get closer to that harmony." Quote, "The tones produced by the movements of the musician remind the individual souls that are in the world of generation and corruption of the joy of the world of the celestial spheres, just as the tones produced by the movements of the celestial spheres and heavenly bodies remind the souls that are there of the joy of the world of the spirits." These cosmological explanations for the effects of music weren't accepted by everyone though. For example, later major philosophers like Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina rejected most of these claims, but they still recognized the healing capabilities of music and they employed it in this way too. There were hospitals in the major cities of the Islamic world, such as Baghdad, which often had a central part of their treatment plan that patients would listen to music, along with creating a pleasant atmosphere in general, including fountains and running water to calm the patients. Regardless of the cosmological or metaphysical reasons for it, everyone basically agreed that music affected the emotions and the well-being of people in very significant ways. And this could, of course, go in different directions. It is for the same reason that some Muslim jurists considered music forbidden, since it agitated the emotions of people too much. There's a famous story often told about the aforementioned Al-Farabi, although the protagonist of the story sometimes changes, that he was asked to come to the court of some high official or sultan or something. So he did, he went there, and then the sultan basically sort of asked him, like, who are you and why do people think you are so wise? What's up with you? Al-Farabi then claimed that he could make any of them laugh, cry, or fall asleep on command. All of the people present were, of course, very skeptical of this. Like, of course, he's not going to make us fall asleep. He's not a magician or something. So they were like, okay, fine. Show us what you got. So what Al-Farabi does is that he brings out his oud. And he starts playing the oud. And it plays one song first in a particular mode, so a particular scale, a maqam, and this makes all the people there laugh hysterically from joy. And then Al-Farabi changes the mode, the scale, or the song perhaps, that he's playing. Suddenly everyone starts crying, just deep crying, all of them. And then lastly, he changes modes once again to another mode, and suddenly everyone falls asleep. And Al-Farabi puts down his oud and walks out. This story probably isn't true, of course, but it's a good example to show that people at this time really believed that music could have these kinds of really profound effects on the emotions and states of human beings and their souls. Looking at the Sufis, or Islamic mystics, this was employed to very dramatic effects, of course, as they developed the ritual of sama', where listening to music became an important religious practice that would bring you into trance and closer to God, even to unite with God. As I made several previous episodes on Sufism and Sufi music, I'm not going to be focusing on that here though. But again, just like in Greece and China, this all depended on what kind of music was being played, of course, as we also saw in the story about Al-Farabi. Different music would have different effects and was appropriate in different circumstances. In Arabic and Persian, also Turkish tradition, music is essentially built on a system of modes called maqamat. A maqam, which is the singular of the word, is similar to a mode or perhaps a scale in Western music, but it's also much broader than that. It not only includes a certain set of notes, but also certain vibes, certain ways of playing, certain recurring phrases, etc. And different modes have been associated with different emotions. A certain mode makes you feel one way, while another maqam makes you feel entirely different. This topic is extensively discussed, for example, by Al-Farabi in his massive work called Kitab al-Musiqa al-Kabir, the Great Book of Music. For example, maqam rast, which is one of the most widely used maqams in Arabic music, was often thought to induce feelings of joy and happiness. Later also things like pride and power. Maqam usak will make you laugh. One of my personal favorite modes, Saba, often has a strong sense of sadness and longing. I often call it the Sufi maqam because it has sort of a sour, kind of painful sound to it, which sort of really expresses the same kind of emotions that a lot of Sufi poetry expresses, where the Sufi poet is distraught by being away from his beloved and wanting to sort of return. So there's this incredibly strong love and passion for a beloved, but that beloved is just out of reach. That's what the maqam Saba sort of invokes, in me at least, which is why I refer to as a Sufi mode. It's a really beautiful maqam. Although in Al-Farabi's work, it is associated more with bravery, because associations like this, like certain modes making you feel a certain way, this will of course always change over time in different cultures and associations. Needless to say, in Islamicate music therapy, such as in the hospitals, different maqams or modes were used for different functions. Some maqams could help cure someone suffering from stress, others will help with depression, still others to relieve toothache. And yes, there are examples of people curing toothache with music, or at least helping alleviate toothache with music. Different maqams were also only appropriate on certain times of the day. Al-Farabi tells us the maqam usak is most appropriate to play during midday, whereas maqam zirgule is better before midday to have the best effect, for instance. The Ikhwan al-Safa writes, quote, "When these notes are combined in rhythmic melodies corresponding to them, and these melodies are then used at the times of day or night whose nature is counter to that of the prevailing illness and sicknesses occurring, they will alleviate them." Furthermore, perhaps the greatest philosopher in the history of the Islamic world, Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, discussed at length the medical uses of music in his many philosophical works, including the significant massive medical treatise Al-Qanun fil Tib, the Canon of Medicine. Here, it becomes clear that just like for the other philosophers we have mentioned, music is used primarily as a complementary treatment. It helps put patients in a calm state and can be useful to help mental afflictions, but is often only complementary to other, more direct treatments of illnesses. But I think it's fascinating just how relevant many of these statements from people like Ibn Sina are. For example, he says, quote, "One of the best and most effective treatments is to strengthen the mental and spiritual strength of the patient, to give him more courage to fight illness, create a loving, pleasant environment for the patient, play the best music for him, and surround him with people that he loves." Or the fact that he states that music is particularly useful to treat cases of love sickness. All of this is, of course, very much still in use by people today, and we basically know that this works, right? I think we've all self-treated our sadness or love sickness by blasting some good tunes. The foundations that these philosophers built, as well as their Greek predecessors, of course, remained in use for centuries afterward in places like the Ottoman Empire. In some places, music therapy is still in use at certain hospitals. Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine became the most widely used medical treatise in Europe as well, right up until the modern age, and these ideas also made their way here. And it's fascinating to see just how much modern science is increasingly showing that these ancient and medieval thinkers were kind of onto something. Perhaps not the particular cosmological theories about the elements or humors of the body, but the general principles that music is an effective tool for therapeutic and medical treatment. Indeed, there is a field, a growing field, called music therapy, which is recognized by modern science as very effective for treating various conditions and illnesses. Music therapists around the world are using this technique to great success, and is becoming an increasingly prominent part of the wider world of medicine. Research shows that listening to music, and especially playing music in different ways, activates a whole host of different parts of the brain at the same time. Music has rhythm with timing and patterns. When singing, it requires the parts of the brain that is associated with speech and understanding to be activated. Sensory and motion-related aspects are required when you play an instrument. And of course, as we all know, music can make us feel deep and profound emotions, thus activating the parts of the brain associated with those. And like I said, this isn't limited to playing music, referred to as active music therapy, but also simply listening, which is referred to as receptive music therapy. And both of these seem to have a lot of the same effects. And the research and results show that this is useful not only for treating things like stress or depression, but also very effective at treating more serious conditions like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and even heart disease, as well as being helpful for people with neurodivergent traits like autism. I'm going to tell you a personal story. Before my grandmother passed away, she had been basically suffering from dementia for several years, and at some point she was just completely gone in a sense, right? There was no way of communicating with her. We couldn't really speak to her. She couldn't speak to us. She didn't really understand, at least that's what it seemed like. But one day when we were visiting her, we decided to play a song that she used to sing when she was young a lot. She would sing this song in church. And when that song came on, she started singing along to the song with lyrics and everything. Not all of the lyrics, but a significant portion of the lyrics. She knew all the melodies and a lot of the words to the song, which was a really profound moment, and it really showed how deeply music is embedded in our memory, right? And that it can sort of light up parts of the brain for a person like this who suffers from dementia, for example, that isn't activated otherwise. It was really profound in different ways. It shows just how deeply and profoundly music becomes ingrained into our soul and our personality. There are even accounts of people that have suffered severe brain damage that has affected their motor skills and speech patterns. There's the example of the US politician Gabby Giffords, who was very brutally shot in the head, I believe, which left her severely with severe brain damage. And she made an almost complete recovery through, among other things, of course, music therapy. It seems, in other words, that the claim by Al-Kindi that he successfully treated a child with paralysis using music isn't perhaps as far-fetched as we might have assumed at first. Music is truly a powerful and magical thing. There are so many perspectives from which we can view the role of music in religion, in society, in politics, in art. And in this video, we have focused specifically on the therapeutic and medical uses of music throughout history, from ancient Greece and China to the Islamic world and all the way up until today, as the growing field of music therapy shows us that this has remained throughout history and even today a very significant part of medicine and therapy more generally. Music can really heal people in different ways. And this has just been a small sample of different examples. There are much more such examples throughout history too. I just made a previous video a couple of weeks ago about the Taranta ritual in southern Italy, where music was used to cure melancholy, what was known as tarantism, which was associated with a spider's bite, but really was probably some sort of more sort of mental condition, right? But music was used there and seemed pretty effective in treating these ailments there too. So that's just one other example among many others throughout history. It's no wonder then that music just makes us feel so good. Thank you everyone for watching. If anyone is interested in healing through music, then you can check out some of my music. There is some of that on this channel. I post most of my music here. You can also find it on Spotify and all the places where you find your music. Check out my link tree in the description for links to all of my socials and the different places that you can find my music. For example, we just put out a single in December called Isthmus, which has received great reception from you guys, so thank you all so much. And anyone who hasn't watched it yet, you can listen to it. Anyone who hasn't heard it yet, you can listen to it on Spotify or whatever you choose to listen to your music, or watch the music video here on my channel. It's called Isthmus, and the band is called Zini. If you're not aware, I also have another channel called Let's Talk Religion, where I post stuff on religion and history and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. So check that out if you're interested. But thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope to see you in a future episode as we keep exploring the fascinating world of music in different ways. And I'll see you in the next video.